So the week before everything went on lockdown, I was trying to sell a Chromebook online, and this guy messaged me. He's like, "Hey, can you let me know if this is still available?" And I couldn't respond because I was preparing for lockdown. And then the day that Ontario declares a state of emergency, he messages me again, and he's like, "Hey man, can you please let me know if this is still available?" I'm like, "Dude, I appreciate your dedication and your passion, but I don't think you understand the gravity of the situation." By the way, if you're wondering what this is, I got a new microphone and the audio quality wasn't as good in the last video as I had hoped, so hopefully from now on this will fix incoming issues. So I'm recording this video on Sunday night and the circuit breaker for the limit down on Dow futures is already tripped, so it looks like it's going to be another bloody day tomorrow. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the level 2 circuit breaker triggers tomorrow, which if you guys don't know, level 2 triggers when the stock market goes down by 13%. So it's just meant to give everybody a breather and collect themselves in case the stock market crashes by too much. So we've had a lot of days when it went down by 7%, which is level 1, when it triggers. And then if it goes down to level 13, then it will trigger again. So I don't want to sound pessimistic, but it might trigger tomorrow. So at times like these, it's important to keep in mind two things, I think. So number one, I think, is that keep in mind your health, right? So losing money is one thing, but you really want to preserve your health. So please stay inside and wash your hands very often, and make sure you follow quarantine procedures, and just watch out for the overall well-being of yourself as well as your family and friends. So it's during these times like this we gotta band together, right? Which brings me to my number 2 point, which is that, as I said, the stock market might crash a lot more, and it's at times like these where your faith in the strategy that you've chosen is really tested, right? So for me, I've chosen the buy and hold strategy, and history has proven that during every dip, if you just buy and hold, eventually things will bounce back and you'll make money, right? So, but in the short term, it's easier said than done, right? So in the short term, you'll see that your portfolio is dropping by, I don't know, like 20-30% or something like that. And it's very difficult for you to not panic sell during that time. So I know it's very understandable that you guys are maybe panicking right now at this point, and seeing your portfolio drop by such massive amounts. But again, for me, I have faith that this will pass, and whatever issues and economic recession that we might be encountering in the near term, eventually these things will pan out. Just hold on for your dear life and don't sell. So before I begin, I just want to make a disclaimer that I'm not a financial advisor, and this is not financial advice. Even though it might sound like I'm recommending this for you to buy this stock, I'm not really recommending anything. Essentially, just don't blame me if you lose money. Now, also, before I begin, I just wanted to share some quarantine memes. I think that's what I'll call this segment. And I'll put some memes up right now for you guys to see. And these are memes that either I've made or I've found off of the internet somewhere, probably stole them off of Reddit. So you guys can enjoy these memes, and yeah, it'll help you pass through these dark times as we experience one of the biggest market crashes in modern history, essentially. And hopefully, I think if one thing good comes out of this market crash, it'll be the memes. So without further ado, let's jump in today's video. Today I'm talking about the most requested stock that I talk about of all times, which is Tesla. Now I just want to begin by saying that I do believe that Tesla will be the next Amazon or the next Apple. And now you guys might be asking, why am I so bullish on Tesla? And that's just due to several reasons that I will present in this video today. But to begin, I just want to tell you guys about some of the metrics that are moving in the right direction for Tesla. And what I mean by that is that if you look at Tesla's trailing 12-month revenue growth, it's really gone up by a lot more than all of its competition. So if you put it in a chart against, let's say, Ford or GM or all these traditional manufacturers, you'll see that Tesla's revenue growth is way higher, coming in at just about 8% compared to a lot of the other car manufacturers that are experiencing negative revenue growth. If you compare EBITDA margin, it's a similar story. Now Tesla just blows everyone out of the water at 14%. Now if you look at estimated revenue growth, Tesla is expected to grow in the high 20s for 2020, and 30% for next year in 2021. Now, I know these numbers were probably written before the whole stock market crash, and these numbers are probably changed by now, but you'll see that even if it's dramatically lower, it'll still be much, much higher than all these traditional automakers that are experiencing negative growth. And the reason for, I think, why Tesla is so dominant over these traditional automakers is really due to several reasons. So the first big reason is just the changing trend from internal combustion or ICE vehicles to EVs. So in a new report by Bloomberg, it is stated that around the year 2032, new car sales of electric vehicles will finally overtake internal combustion vehicles. And by 2040, 80% of the sales in the UK will be electric vehicles. And if you look at all the different laws that are being passed across the European Union. I heard that Ireland is going to ban gasoline and diesel vehicle new car sales by 2030. So actually after a while, by 2030, which is just 10 short years from now, it'll actually be illegal for you to sell a gasoline or a fossil fuel car. So these car manufacturers, they have to switch to electric vehicles or else they literally would not be allowed to sell their vehicles. So I think that's number one, and that's such an advantage for Tesla, who only makes electric vehicles versus all these traditional auto manufacturers that have to change all their systems and adapt to the new way of making cars. And the biggest reason that I think that Tesla has a competitive advantage is that, at least right now, there are no reasonable alternatives to Tesla. Now, I know you guys are going to bring up the Rivian truck or the Porsche Taycan or the Audi e-tron or all these other competitors. But, if I'm being honest and looking at the market, I wouldn't say that any of those are true Tesla competitors. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can look at this chart right now that compares electric car sales in the US and look at just how dominant, let's say, the Tesla Model 3, which is their most popular brand, is compared to all its other competitions, these supposed Tesla killers, right? And if you really think that the Chevy Bolt is a true competitor to the Tesla Model 3, well, I gotta ask you, have you sat inside a Tesla Model 3 and have you sat inside a Chevy Bolt? And if you sat inside both, I think it'll be pretty clear that those aren't real competitors to Tesla. And even Rivian, who just got a massive investment from Amazon, I think right now Rivian looks really promising. And if they get their operations in order, they could become a true competitor to Tesla. But as of right now, I think Rivian just doesn't have the scale that Tesla does. And let's say if Rivian gets 1 million orders for their next big truck, will they actually be able to deliver 1 million of their trucks anytime soon? And I don't think that right now, at least, they don't have the capability of doing so. And I think that another advantage of Tesla is that they go with the dealership free model. So the traditional way of buying cars is that you go to a dealership and the dealership runs off a franchisee model. So the franchisee is often in conflict with the car manufacturer, right? Because the car manufacturers, they want to sell these electric vehicles. But these guys that run the dealership, they make most of their money from maintenance and from oil changes and all that stuff. And what do you know about electric cars, right? They don't have engines, or they don't need to change oil. So all these car dealerships, they actually don't want to sell electric vehicles because they don't make any money off of the maintenance of those cars. I feel like that's almost a conflict of interest because car manufacturers want to sell these electric cars, but the dealers, they don't want to, right? And this might be anecdotal, but one of my friends who recently, he was interested in buying a Volkswagen e-Golf, and he went to a Volkswagen dealership. And from what he told me, if he felt like they didn't want to sell him that car because they kept on telling him how it was going to take 3 months for him to even get an order in because they didn't have any in inventory. And they kept on trying to push him to buy the regular Golf as opposed to the electric version. And in the end, he really needed a car soon, and he didn't want to wait like 3 months because the electric Golf was going to be more money anyways. So he did the math, and right now at least he could save quite a bit of money by just buying a gas car, and he doesn't have to wait. So in the end, he actually ended up just buying the regular Golf. And I feel like this is the thought process of a lot of people who want to go look for electric vehicles that's not a Tesla. They expect to walk out with an electric vehicle, but the dealership, they don't want to sell it. So then they ended up just buying a regular gas vehicle. So that's an advantage of going with a dealership free model that Tesla has, where they don't have this conflict of interest going. And second of all, I just think that Tesla has such a tech advantage over the competition. Now, what do I mean by tech advantage? Well, I think my dad just bought a Volkswagen Jetta, and in the new Volkswagen, they use Apple CarPlay or Android Auto for their entertainment or infotainment purposes, right? And I feel like this is a trend, and I'm not trying to pick on Volkswagen. I feel like this is a trend for most manufacturers that are not Tesla, right? They're really bad at making software, so then they have to outsource all of this software to, let's say, Apple or Google for their Android Auto, because they've just completely given up on trying to make a proper infotainment system. And if you look at Tesla, they're the only ones that are not, let's say, an Apple or Google that's actually been able to make an infotainment system properly. Again, this might be anecdotal. I went to the University of Waterloo, which is a school that's really famous for software engineering and computer science. And from what I know, if you were to offer a new computer science graduate from the University of Waterloo a job from Tesla and a same job from, let's say, a Ford, then I think 99% of people would choose to go to Tesla as opposed to Ford, right? And Ford will probably have to pay quite a bit of money extra to entice that person to go work for Ford instead of Tesla, right? So even if they gave, let's say, even if Ford gave that person $10,000 extra per year, I think most people at that point would still choose to go to Tesla, right? So if you were Ford, you'd have to spend quite a bit of money just to be able to afford the engineers to convince them not to go to Tesla, right? And I think that's a tough sell these days because Ford's revenue has been going down, and they just don't have the cash to be able to compete with Tesla on this front. So in terms of talent, I think Tesla's got the first pick of all the software engineers and all the talent, and that kind of creates a virtuous cycle for Tesla and a vicious cycle for Ford, right? So Ford can't come up with the best engineers, so then they end up falling behind in terms of software, and then that leads to them being less appealing to new engineers. And going further about the performance competitive advantage of Tesla, if you compare the new Porsche Taycan, which is supposedly the Tesla killer, to the Tesla Model S, you'll see that the Tesla Model S is significantly cheaper than the Porsche Taycan and beats the Porsche Taycan on almost every metric. So I think that the Porsche Taycan, it does look nicer than a Model S, I'll give it that. But as a true competitor, I don't think that it's quite at the level yet where it can really compete with the Model S, because it's just so much more expensive and you get actually less numbers. And as I implied earlier, in order for these traditional automakers to catch up, they would have to completely transform their assembly lines, right? So for Tesla, their Gigafactory and everything that they're building right now has been built from the ground up to accommodate electric vehicles, because they don't have to go through the changes that are necessary in terms of electrifying their assembly line and modernizing their workforce, then they could save a lot on costs. And this is not to mention Tesla's acquisitions of battery technology companies and all this R&D that they're pouring money into. They just have such a big advantage in terms of R&D versus traditional automakers as well. And moving on to the second biggest point, which is their autonomous driving network. So I know this is sort of the pie in the sky, golden goose sort of idea right now, but I think in the future this could really become a thing. And the first thing that I want to mention is that Tesla has such a data advantage over everyone else. Now, if you're, let's say, an Uber or a Waymo or some other tech companies that's doing autonomous driving, you'd have to hire an engineer to sit in the car while the car drives around a closed course, right? Because you want to collect data and you want someone to sit in there just in case something goes wrong, they could take over. So the technology is not there yet for it to be fully autonomous and for it to, test itself or anything like that, right? And the thing is that in order for you to do that, you'd have to hire someone, and that person sitting in the driver's seat might charge you $50, $60, $70, or I don't know how much they make, probably even more than that, for you to be able to test that vehicle, right? But where does Tesla get their data from? They get their data from customers, right? People who are actually driving the car in the real world, not in a closed course. So if you have a Tesla that has autopilot enabled, every time you hit the autopilot button, that data gets sent to Tesla. The scale of it differs in magnitude, right? Compared to how many people that are testing Waymos or Ubers on closed courses versus how many people are using autopilot in real life. There's a massive difference between those numbers. And also, keep in mind that if you're Uber or Waymo, you're paying people to drive the cars for you, right? You're paying people to test the cars. But if you're Tesla, then people are paying you to test the cars because they're the customers and they're the ones who are paying, thousands of dollars for an autonomous driving package on their cars, and they're just driving everyday life for free. So not only is there a difference in terms of the magnitude of data that you're getting, there's also a directional difference, right? Instead of paying people to get the data, people are paying you to give you the data. And that's such a massive advantage that I don't think that Wall Street or people who are not really into the industry are really understanding or appreciating. Because in order for you to unlock autonomous driving, you really need a ton of data to power those machine learning algorithms, right? So I think that Tesla has such a massive advantage in this field compared to just about anyone else. Now, further going on the autonomous driving, I know Uber is trying to do this too. And if you look at the data for how much Uber's cut is, it's about 35%. So that means that every time you order an Uber, 35% of the money that you pay goes to Uber and the rest goes to the driver. So imagine that if you could take the driver out of the equation, and if you could just pay 35% of what you're paying now for an Uber or for a taxi. And that's what Tesla's trying to achieve, right? Imagine if you have fully autonomous cars, then you'll be paying literally 35% of what you're paying right now for Ubers. And that is just such an economic opportunity that is just massive. So if Tesla actually makes the taxi network become a thing, then that's going to be a huge boon for Tesla in the future. And lastly, I just want to talk about Tesla's energy business and all the other miscellaneous stuff. So again, the energy business is one thing that I think Wall Street is just kind of ignoring, right? And don't forget that Tesla also has their Model Y coming up. And with the latest crisis of the outbreak, I think that the Model Y news and the Model Y being released and that kind of stuff has kind of been swept under the rug, understandably. But I think that once the Model Y comes out, that's going to be a huge thing for Tesla because crossovers are by far the most popular vehicles in the United States by category. So I think that the Tesla Model Y will be huge in terms of sales. And if you look at those other smaller opportunities like Tesla Insurance, and you might not think insurance is a big deal, but if you look at how Warren Buffett made his money, right? So Warren Buffett made a lot of money from the insurance business, and that's because insurance companies are really rich in cash. So people deposit their cash and pay their premiums in it. And when something bad happens, the insurance company has to pay out. But the percentage of times when bad things happen are small percentage probability events. So most of the time, insurance companies actually have a ton of cash, and then they could use that cash to do other things. They don't just let it sit around in a bank account or something like that, right? They actually go out and use that cash and invest and grow their business. So I think if Tesla Insurance ever becomes a thing, that's really like the golden goose of vertical integration, right? So they sell you the car and you get to take care of your insurance with them as well. So that's sort of one aspect of Tesla's business where they can have more control over your user experience, and that makes your user experience better as a customer too. So it's kind of like the Apple approach, right? So if you look at an iPhone, everything's perfectly integrated, right? Everything's managed by Apple. The hardware and the software are both built by Apple, and all the services that you probably use on your iPhone are built by Apple as well. So that model has worked really well for Apple. And I think that if Tesla were to do sort of a similar approach, but with cars, then that'll be super successful. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. And talking about Apple, I just want to mention that both Tesla and Apple has a cult-like fan base. So people who are loyal to Apple and loyal to Tesla they actually share a lot of common traits, right? So Apple fanboys are definitely loyal to Steve Jobs back when he was around. And Tesla fanboys like me are pretty deathly loyal to Elon Musk, right? And it's hard to put a price or a dollar amount on how much exactly that cult-like fan base is worth. I think that you don't underestimate the power of sort of like this cult-like fan base. Because there are people that I know that are Tesla shareholders that they will not sell the stock no matter how much it goes down, right? So, tomorrow the stock might very well crash by over 20%, right? As the stock market itself is probably going to crash by at least, 5 to 10% tomorrow. Those people who are holding Tesla stock, even if it crashes 20%, I know that they probably won't sell. And if you look at Tesla's stock performance, yes, it's crashed a lot from its peak of 900 as of right now. But if you look at the performance of Tesla, if I buy Tesla now, I would still be averaging up on my position. That's pretty impressive because I only bought Tesla stock maybe like less than a year ago. And the fact is that we're experiencing one of the worst crashes in stock market history. And if I were to buy now, I'd still be averaging up. And Tesla stock has proven to be super resilient in this market crash. And I don't expect that to change anytime soon just because of these diehard loyal Tesla fanboys that are like me that are just holding the stock and just not selling even if it crashes. And which brings me to my final point, which is Elon Musk himself, the CEO of Tesla. Now, I think that Elon Musk is a very interesting character. And in my opinion, Elon Musk is really one of the most important CEOs ever because I think that Elon Musk's dedication to his business, both Tesla and SpaceX, and all his other smaller ventures that he's trying to do, I think his dedication is really something that we've never really seen before. Or we see very rarely in the business world. Now, what I mean by this, well, Elon Musk recently tweeted back in December, I think it was, that if SpaceX and Tesla goes bankrupt, then so will he. It just shows he's willing to put 100% of his net worth into Tesla and SpaceX. And if those companies don't work out, then, he'll just become poor and homeless and he'll literally be broke, right? And he'll have thrown all his money in, and if it doesn't work, then too bad. He'll no longer be a billionaire. And I think that type of dedication is pretty impressive. For common people, if you were to make, a few $1,000,000 or $50 million, let's say, you might use some of that money to start your own business, right? And you might try to throw a lot of money at that business if it's something that you're really passionate about. But I think for most people, they would keep a small proportion of that money aside. And in case their business doesn't work out, they still have, let's say, $5 million in the bank, and they'll still be set for the rest of their life, right? I think when you look at Elon Musk, that's not the case for him at all. If Tesla and SpaceX goes bankrupt, then he would have spent all his own money too. He would be broke. And another sign of Elon Musk's dedication is that he recently complained that they should take the word investor off of his Wikipedia page. And that's because he's not really an investor. So 100% of his wealth is tied up with Tesla and SpaceX in such a way that he's not really an investor. He's just an owner of the business, and he doesn't invest his money into other stocks. So he's not, in his mind, he's not really an investor. And I think that part is also impressive, is that he's so willing to dedicate his entire life to the mission that he's trying to achieve. And that's always a good sign for me as a shareholder, because I want to know as a shareholder that the management is completely committed to the mission. They're not there for their paycheck. They're not there to get a huge bonus. They're actually there to get the job done and to grow the business. And that's exactly what Elon Musk is doing. So right now you're probably wondering if I have a price target for Tesla. And this is a really hard question for me to answer, because usually I don't like to give price targets. Just because I think that, especially given these days, in these market conditions, things can move up and down by like 10% a day. And it's really hard for me to establish what a price target for Tesla should be. But if you were to force me to make a long-term prediction, I think you could easily, 4 or 5 times the price from here. Within a matter of 5 years. And if you wait an even longer period of time, let's say like a 10-year or a 20-year horizon, I think this stock could easily 10x. Now, I read this report from ARK Invest. And ARK Invest, if you don't know, they're a research firm, and they also run an ETF and a fund that you can buy into. And they focus on disruptive technology, sort of like Tesla and other biotech companies. And ARK Invest posted this research on Tesla where they came out with different price targets or different scenarios on what could happen and what prices Tesla stock could achieve if they achieve these goals. Now, I think some of their bigger, higher price targets are kind of overly optimistic. Some of them are like tens of thousands of dollars per share. And I don't know if Tesla's going to hit, $20,000 a share or something crazy like that. But I think that for some of their other lower price targets, I think that that's more than reasonable, right? So if you were to say that Tesla will hit 3,000 in 10 years, I think that that's a very likely scenario, even given Tesla's growth potential. So I think that if you were to ask me to give a price target, I think it's anywhere from 5x to 10x from here within the next 5 to 10 years. So that makes it easy to remember too, right? 5 to 10x, 5 to 10 years. So I'll link down in the description ARK Invest's article, and you can take a look at it if you want. It's pretty interesting. And if Tesla actually achieves those prices within the time horizon that ARK Invest says they will, then I'll be seriously impressed. Now, with that being said, I do put my money where my mouth is, and I did buy 2 shares of Tesla the other day, and I'll post a screenshot as evidence right now. And I think that I'll keep on buying into Tesla if the stock drops any further. So if the stock drops below, let's say, I don't know, $300 a share, I think that that's a very enticing price point for me to further build up my position and build up a much higher percentage of my portfolio dedicated to Tesla stock. So yeah, I think this video is getting a little long, so I'm going to stop it here. But please leave down in the comments if you have any questions. Don't forget, I have a book, Financial Independence Theory. Links down in the description if you're interested. Also, don't forget to give this video a like and consider subscribing if you like the series. Last of all, don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Links also down in the description for that. With that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks. Bye-bye.